Zhang Heng's earthquake device. There have been accounts all the way from the ancient times of young Chinese dynasties more than 2,000 years ago that talk about, in detail, a strange device capable of measuring and predicting the position of earthquakes. The device was said to have been created by a genius known as Heng that lived in China during the Han dynasty and was responsible for a wide variety of breakthroughs in astronomy, mathematics, science, engineering, cartography, and poetry. Interestingly enough, it appeared that the emperor during this time was well aware of the fact that when an earthquake would occur in a far-off remote region of China, it was impossible to know how and when to send aid if no one from the region had the supplies vast enough to reach the emperor and alert him of the damages caused by the earthquake. This led Zhang Heng to create a device that was detailed in Chinese literature as being capable of detecting the small movements of a seismic event from far away and pointing towards the direction of its origin with incredible accuracy. Although the inventor would pass away roughly 7 years later, before the first earthquake could occur and prove the legitimacy of the device, the emperor writes that one day he and his servants noticed that the Zhang Heng device was pointing in a direction after having detected a disturbance. Several weeks later, a messenger arrived from a distant land claiming that a region had been at the center of a large earthquake that caused devastation and destruction to its people that then required aid from the emperor. This confirmed the device's ability to sense the position and direction of earthquakes, and so was used then on as the main mechanism of any information regarding the natural disasters in the region. The seismoscope was a bronze vessel about 6 feet tall and shaped like a large wine jar. Inside the vessel, there was a suspended pendulum with a mechanism that would trigger the release of one of 8 dragon heads on the outside of the vessel, each pointing in a different direction. Each dragon head would open its mouth to drop a bronze ball into one of 8 bronze toads positioned below the dragons. The toads were designed to make a distinctive sound when a ball was dropped into them, indicating the direction of the earthquake. Zhang Heng's seismoscope was the first known instrument that could detect earthquakes from a distance without the need for human observation. It was based on the principle that earthquakes produce waves that travel through the ground and cause motion. The pendulum inside the vessel was designed to remain stationary during normal conditions, but any motion caused by an earthquake would cause the pendulum to swing and trigger the release of one of the dragon heads. The seismoscope was considered a remarkable achievement in ancient China, and it was believed to have accurately predicted several earthquakes during its time. However, the device was lost to history and only rediscovered in the 20th century when a replica was found in an archaeological excavation. Today, Zhang Heng's seismoscope is considered an important milestone in the history of seismology and earthquake engineering. The principles behind the device have been refined and improved upon over the centuries, leading to the development of modern seismometers and other earthquake detection technologies. Interestingly enough, modern-day seismographs, devices that research scientists use to measure the intensity and direction of an earthquake, follow the same principles outlined in the Zhang Heng earthquake device. This more than proves the validity of the device and ancient texts, and proves that the ancients had far more knowledge and awareness of the world around them than we give them credit for in the modern day. Scientists attempted to rebuild the pyramids at Giza and failed. Back in 1978, a group of Japanese researchers conducted an experiment aimed at exploring the methods used by the ancient Egyptians to build their pyramids. Specifically, they attempted to construct a mini-pyramid using primitive techniques in order to gain a deeper understanding of the process. Unfortunately, the experiment did not produce the expected outcomes, leaving the team with more unanswered questions. The researchers started a comprehensive project based on a plan to construct a 20-meter-high pyramid using primitive tools like pulleys, lifting ropes, and other manual methods. To make this project a reality, they had the support of 100 skilled Egyptian workers and funding from a Japanese television show. The collaboration with the Japanese television show led to a decision to record the entire experiment and turn it into a documentary. This project was undertaken with the permission of the Egyptian government, under the condition that the small pyramid, built as part of this experiment, would be taken down, the area would be cleaned up and restored to its original state in a timely manner. Overall, This was a comprehensive plan that required the use of primitive tools, support from skilled workers, funding from Japanese television, and permission from the Egyptian government for execution. During the experimental phase, the team, made up of brilliant minds, faced numerous inexplicable challenges. Their initial attempt at cutting 4-ton stones using primitive tools like pulleys proved to be extremely difficult, time-consuming, and expensive. To overcome this challenge, they had to take the drastic step of reducing the height of the pyramid from 20 to 10 meters, and the weight of the stones from 4 to 1 ton. Furthermore, they also incorporated electric saws into the cutting process, which went against the experiment's goal of utilizing only simple tools and techniques. This was the team's first use of technology during the experiment, and it proved to be a significant departure from the original plan. Upon further attempts, the team faced consistent failure in transporting the enormous ancient stones from Tura to the Giza Plateau, as even the commonly used methods of wooden rafts or boats weren't successful. However, the team utilized technological advancements and flat ships to transport the stones to the beach near the pyramid. Despite the stones being near the construction site, 50 workers could not move a single stone a single inch, which meant that the process would last for several more years if they had carried on trying to use the same methods. To overcome this obstacle, they established a railway track towards the site. Nevertheless, the journey was far from being completed, as it proved to be difficult to move the stones to the uppermost point of the pyramid, driving them towards a solution of employing cranes and eventually resorting to helicopters to lift the stones to their designated location. Despite utilizing various technological means, the project ultimately failed to meet the required standards. While the builders were successful in completing the construction of the pyramid, the process was deemed unsuccessful due to the numerous challenges encountered. So essentially, the team built a much smaller pyramid, from stones that didn't weigh anywhere near those used on the pyramids at Giza, and they also utilized cranes, helicopters, and modern-day equipment, and even after doing all of this, their pyramid was much smaller in comparison. Though Tesla would go on to make headlines across many different news outlets for a number of breakthroughs and inventions, there were also a number of articles posted about him during his life that spoke of a far more peculiar side of him: the ability to predict the future. When looking through old letters that the inventor wrote to his friends Katherine Johnson, Robert Johnson, and George Westinghouse, it becomes apparent to researchers that the inventor had the strange and accurate ability to warn people of threats of the future. Examples of such warnings of the future that have been written about in these collections of letters include one warning in which Tesla told Katherine Johnson and George Westinghouse to not get on their train back to the city and to wait another day before leaving. After doing as instructed, the train had crashed and soon made headlines as being a national tragedy during its time. Katherine Johnson would later praise Tesla as a man with the gift and would go on to believe he was able to predict the future with startling accuracy. Another incredible example of such future predictions includes his warnings written to both John Jacob Astor IV and John Pierpont Morgan relative to the Titanic. Tesla would write to them in detail that he was aware of the fact that the ship would sink and wanted them to refund their tickets as to not risk their lives on the trip. This would lead J.P. Morgan to quickly refund his ticket, believing that Nikola Tesla also had the ability to predict the future, whereas John Jacob Astor IV, a close friend of Tesla's, would dismiss the letter believing Tesla to be paranoid. John Jacob would later be one of the most notable figures left behind on the Titanic, known for cracking a variety of jokes before falling into the icy waters. The earthquake machine. One of the most peculiar reports that surround the inventor Nikola Tesla is that of his oscillating machine that is believed to be able to cause mini earthquakes within his vicinity that become increasingly more powerful as the machine is left on for a prolonged period of time. Though many claim that the reports are nothing more than exaggerated accounts, the original event was recorded by a reporter back in 1912 after interviewing Tesla, of whom gave a detailed account of his first attempt of testing the machine in practical terms. According to the inventor himself, he brought a small version of his oscillating device, no larger than an alarm clock, and attached it to the steel framework of a building still undergoing construction. After adjusting the oscillator, the building began to tremble and the steel workers all across the structure quickly came down, believing that an earthquake had just occurred. The police had been called shortly after, as an investigation quickly began, causing Tesla to quickly retrieve his device and leaving shortly after. Although many now believe that the story was made up by Nikola Tesla for nothing more than additional media attention, others disagree given the fact that, theoretically, if an oscillating device could match the resonance frequency of an object, it could begin to cause it to vibrate and tear apart, similar to that of a violin shattering a crystal glass. The mysterious radio signal from space. Looking through the many letters that Nikola Tesla had written to friends and colleagues shows that the eccentric inventor had a firm belief in that of advanced life. This belief came from his rather interesting claims that he had engaged with radio communications with an advanced civilization from the Martian surface that was sending him numbers and other brief messages for him to decode. The strange fact that led to the most credence surrounding this theory is that of Tesla's invention of the radio device, far before any other inventor was nearing the creation of such a device. This means that though Tesla would be the first human to have created the radio, there were others well aware of the use of radio waves to communicate with Tesla when his device was first completed. According to the claim, Tesla wrote extensively in his notes that when he made the first radio capable of receiving and broadcasting his signal, as soon as he turned on the device, he could already hear another person's voice on the other side. He would later go on to claim that the people transmitting him a signal were those of beings living on the surface of Mars, and that they were attempting to make first contact with him. This was only made more eerie, as Nikola Tesla wrote that this voice was that of a man calling out his name, saying, "Tesla, 1, 2, 3, over and over again, before the signal cut out entirely." Many researchers speculate that this signal could have been nothing more than background radiation, misinterpreted by the inventor, that was caused by a solar wind of the sun. However, many believe that perhaps something far more creepy could have been going on in the background. No explanation for this strange occurrence has been provided, and still many more speculate that perhaps Nikola Tesla made contact with something not quite human. Ranging from advanced beings to time travelers, many seem hell-bent on trying to discover the root cause of Nikola Tesla's first received broadcasts. In history, it is often remembered that alchemists were nothing more than crazed mystics that were ostracized by the academic scholars and scientists of their time, only to later show evidence of their discoveries that would be quickly renamed and adopted by scientists as chemistry, while those going by the name of alchemy were still at the forces of ridicule. It appears that, for the special case of Nikola Tesla, the very same story applies to the inventor as well. Tesla had often been referred to as a mystic throughout his life, believing in a number of strange theories, and sometimes even magical beliefs that led to him being considered an outcast by the academic community of his time, as well as being ridiculed by his professor during his time spent at a university. This ridicule would also carry over into his career, as he would often discuss, on length, the concept of the ether. The ether has often been a mystical, invisible energy that makes up the universe, referenced in old folklores and legends. Tesla would talk at length about his discoveries on the ether and making bold claims that, in the future, the ether could be tapped into and would allow people to see each other and communicate over great distances instantaneously on small telephonic devices. This led to the worsening of his ridicule, and even many claiming that Tesla had lost his mind in his older age. Interestingly enough, he would later prove to be correct in his belief of the ether, arguing that all matter is created from the ether and is nothing more than energy, wave, and frequency. Though the ether of today is referred to as the electromagnetic spectrum, the forgotten term used by Tesla, and the accuracy of his mysticism still shines through in the modern day. The mystery of the fortifications of Mycenae. The fortifications of Mycenae are a series of defensive structures that surround the ancient city of Mycenae in the northeastern part of the Peloponnese Peninsula in Greece. The fortifications are thought to have been constructed during the Late Bronze Age, around the 13th century BCE. The walls are made up of two main sections, the outer walls and the citadel walls. The outer walls form a roughly triangular shape around the city, while the citadel walls enclose the Acropolis on top of a hill. The walls are made of large blocks of limestone and stand up to 13 feet high in some places. One of the most impressive features of the fortifications is the Lion Gate, which is the main entrance to the citadel. The gate features two massive stone pillars, each carved with the relief of a lion. The gate is also decorated with a triangular relief depicting two lions facing a column, which is believed to represent the unity of the Mycenaean rulers. The walls were likely built for defensive purposes, as the city was a major center of trade and commerce during the Late Bronze Age. The walls would have protected the city from invaders and provided a sense of security for the people living inside. The fortifications are considered a masterpiece of ancient engineering and are recognized as a World Heritage Site. They provide a glimpse into the architectural and defensive capabilities of the ancient Mycenaeans, who are widely regarded as one of the most important civilizations of the Bronze Age. The walls were built using a technique called Cyclopean masonry, which involved fitting together large, irregular stones without the use of mortar. The stones were cut to fit together as closely as possible, with smaller stones used to fill in gaps. This technique gave the walls their distinctive appearance, with massive, irregular stones forming the base of the walls and smaller stones used to build up the top layers. The walls themselves were massive, standing up to 13 feet tall in some places and up to 26 feet thick at the base. They were constructed in a series of steps, with the walls rising up from a foundation of large stones laid in a trench. The walls were then built up in layers, with each layer consisting of smaller stones that were fitted into the gaps between the larger stones. The walls were reinforced with towers and gateways, which were also built using the Cyclopean masonry technique. Cyclopean masonry is a style of construction used in ancient times, characterized by the use of massive stones that are roughly shaped and fitted together without the use of mortar. The term Cyclopean comes from the Greek legend of the Cyclops, who were believed to have built the walls of ancient Mycenae using massive boulders. Cyclopean masonry is typically found in the walls of fortifications, palaces, and other monumental structures from the ancient world. The stones used in Cyclopean masonry can weigh several tons and are often irregularly shaped. They are fitted together with great precision, using no mortar or other binding materials, and are sometimes so tightly fitted that a knife blade cannot be inserted between them. Cyclopean masonry was used extensively in ancient Greece, as well as in other parts of the world. The technique of building with massive, irregular stones without the use of mortar has been used in various cultures around the world, including ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. Cyclopean masonry was used for its durability and strength, as well as for its aesthetic qualities. The massive stones used in Cyclopean masonry created an imposing and impressive appearance, conveying a sense of grandeur and power. The technique of fitting stones together without mortar also allowed for greater stability and resistance to earthquakes and other natural disasters. The mermaid sightings of Kiryat Yam. Back in 2009, there were witness reports coming from the local residents living in the Israeli town of Kiryat Yam that had believed they had seen what they described as a mermaid swimming close to the shores of the town, located next to the Mediterranean Sea. According to the reports, a man by the name of Shlomo Cohen was one of the first to report the sighting with his friends. According to his account, they first saw what looked like that of an injured woman lying on the sand. As they approached closer, the woman sat up and then quickly jumped into the water, disappearing as the image of a tail followed behind her. Others claim that, at sunset, you can catch a glimpse of mermaids swimming by the shore that will wave at onlookers or get close to the surface of the water to be seen. Interestingly enough, the increased number of these sightings have left researchers in the town wondering what could be causing these strange sightings. In order to get to the bottom of the claims, the town has offered a $1 million reward for anyone of whom can gather evidence as to the creature's origin and likeness. This has led a number of different researchers, tourists and enthusiasts racing to try to uncover the cause of these sightings and what could very well be the truth behind the accounts. Given the fact that accounts of mermaids have been reported all throughout history, as well as mermaid-like creatures being referenced in nearly all mythologies, this could very well mean that Israel has seen the first mass-reported sightings of such creatures in the modern day, and that, very soon, they may be rediscovered once again. The first reported sightings of mermaids date back to ancient Assyria, around 900 BC, where they were depicted as half-human and half-fish creatures in artwork and mythology. However, the most famous and enduring mermaid legends come from Greek mythology, where they were known as sirens and were said to lure sailors to their doom with their enchanting songs. In medieval Europe, mermaids were often associated with Christian religious symbolism and were seen as a representation of temptation and sin. However, they were also believed to have healing powers and were sometimes depicted as saints or angels. Throughout history, many sailors and fishermen have reported sightings of mermaids, and some cultures still believe in their existence today. The Wheel of Spirits. Located at the Golan Heights is that of a massive ancient megalithic structure referred to by locals as the Wheel of Spirits. The entire structure is made up of more than 40,000 basalt rocks placed in circles radiating from a central mount that's roughly 15 feet high at its center. The outermost circle of the structure is roughly 520 feet in diameter and stands at 8 feet tall. Referred to by archaeologists as the Rujum el-Hiri, the ancient megalithic structure has a number of strange traits that make it a mystery in the modern day and a center for rumors and urban legends surrounding its dark past. A well-known archaeologist by the name of Rami Arav, after spending a considerable amount of time investigating the site and looking into the recovered minor artifacts, came to the conclusion that the site was more than just a massive structure of religious significance and was, quite obviously, that of a religious site for a cult. He also believed that the cause for the creation of the concentric circles as that to prevent people from disturbing the rituals that would take place known as the Dharma. This has led many to believe that the site holds a terrible curse and could have been used in attempts to summon dark entities. Today, many claim that the site is haunted and could be a portal into another world that connects our reality with a much darker one. A book predicted the sinking of the Titanic. Although it has often been regarded as one of the most accurate and strangest coincidences in all of history, it appears that before thoughts of even construction, the Titanic was started. There had been a book written that completely predicted the events that would unfold on the RMS Titanic's maiden voyage. The book was written and published back in 1898, more than 14 years before the ship set off on its journey through to the North Atlantic. The book is titled as The Wreck of the Titan and tells a harrowing tale of the largest ocean liner ship that had ever been built, known as the Titan. In the story, the Titan sets off on its journey and strikes an iceberg in the North Atlantic Ocean, which causes it to quickly sink. Although that might be more than enough for people to see the coincidences, eerily enough that does not appear to be the end of it. In the book, the Titan sank in April, similar to the same month that the Titanic sank. Both ships held similar names. Both were described as being the largest craft afloat and the greatest works of men. The book claimed that the Titan was over 800 feet long and displaced more than 45,000 tons, similar to the Titanic, that was 882 feet long and displaced 46,000 tons. Both ships were described as unsinkable, while also utilizing the strengths of a triple screw propeller. Both were described as having a shortage of lifeboats, as well as striking the iceberg at 25 knots, and last but not least, both ships were described as carrying 2,200 passengers, of which the majority suffered a terrible fate. The cause for these strange coincidences are completely unknown, and even the author himself has been surprised as to the strange nature of the book and the way it matched the sinking of the Titanic. The Mystery of Lawrence Sullivan. On the 16th of October, back in 1930, 3-year-old Lawrence Sullivan would join his uncle, John Sullivan, for a short day trip to Mount Jefferson, located in the Nevada Toyabe National Forest. The two would arrive in the area after passing through the small town of Round Mountain, Nevada, located only 150 miles southeast of the heavily populated city of Reno, Nevada. The town of Round Mountain, with a population of a little less than 2,000 residents, and the surrounding area is considered by local residents as being an isolated location found within the heart of the Nevada desert. Although the region is not considered a frequently visited hotspot for tourists or hikers, the reason for why John and Lawrence Sullivan would be in the area was due to John's primary source of income. According to close family members, John worked full-time as a prospector and would buy the land rights to a plot in order to mine and sell natural mineral deposits in the area. It was often common for John to travel out to isolated areas, often in the middle of nowhere, to first survey the land and check to see if there were enough natural resources that would make the initial investment worth the risk, before purchasing the land and adjacent properties. It would be shortly before his trip to the isolated heart of the Nevada desert that he would offer to bring along his nephew, as he expected to be in and out of the area fairly quickly, and had no plans of letting the boy leave his vehicle after arriving at the property. It would be only a few hours before noon that John and Lawrence Sullivan would arrive at Mount Jefferson, one of the tallest mountains a part of the Nevada Desert Mountain Range, with a peak elevation of about 12,000 feet and covered with dense foliage and large trees. After traveling to the end of the road leading to the prospecting site, located at the base of Jefferson Canyon, John would park his car at the 7,600-foot elevation point and give the explicit rules to Lawrence that he was not to get out of the vehicle for any reason and that he would soon return. Shortly after, John would then leave the vehicle and hike up a small nearby hill to get a better vantage point of the land. John Sullivan would later tell investigators that he remembered walking to the top of the hill and looking over to see Lawrence still sitting in the car as they both waved to each other. After waving, John would then travel to the other side of the hill, out of view of the vehicle. Within the span of about 10 minutes, John would claim that he would inspect the area, mark any interesting features such as a small creek, types of trees, and open areas that would make excavating much easier, before returning back to the vehicle and noticing that Lawrence Sullivan had disappeared. Panicked at the thought that Lawrence may have wandered off and become lost, John Sullivan would spend the next half hour in the area, calling out for Lawrence to return while searching the surrounding area. After being unable to locate any sign of his nephew, John would leave the area to travel to the nearest town to report the disappearance and to ask for help in the search for him. Investigators would first report to the area, looking in the general vicinity where John Sullivan had claimed to wave at Lawrence on the small hill, believing that Lawrence had most likely exited the vehicle after seeing his uncle wave to him and traveled to the small mound to find his uncle. Although the uncle would tell investigators that it was highly unlikely that he had merely missed Lawrence, as he called out to him several times and searched the area, there were not many other options for Lawrence to have traveled. According to investigators, the area where Lawrence had vanished, referred to as the Jefferson Canyon, was an extremely rugged valley that was nearly completely encircled by steep mountains on almost all sides. Given the fact that Lawrence was aware of John's location, it seemed most likely to investigators that he had traveled in the same direction. Volunteers would join the search, traveling from the nearby towns of Tonopah, Manhattan, and Round Mountain, including close family and friends from all over the state. It would not be long for the search parties to reach over 100 volunteers as local sheriff deputies and soldiers from a nearby military base organized the search and rescue operations and recruited an increasing number of local residents to assist in the search for Lawrence. Unfortunately for the search and rescue volunteers, the first day of searching for Lawrence would yield no signs of his recovery. Investigators would spend the first day of Lawrence's disappearance looking in the valley and downhill from the location, yet would find no sign of him. On the second day, one of the search and rescue volunteers would instead decide to travel up from the valley into a more difficult-to-access location found in the upper northern valley. While traveling through the area, he would locate a small ball cap that looked as if it could have belonged to the boy. After returning with the article of clothing in hand, the hat would then be confirmed by John Sullivan as having belonged to Lawrence, pointing investigators in a completely different direction. The area where Lawrence's cap had been found was in the complete opposite direction from where John Sullivan had been standing when waving back at Lawrence, as well as being located at a much higher elevation, implying that Lawrence must have exited the vehicle and immediately began ascending the steep mountain in the opposite direction from where investigators had initially theorized. Despite relocating search efforts around the upper part of the northern valley where Lawrence's ball cap was found, the search and rescue teams would be unable to locate any other sign of the 3-year-old over the following day as they continued to comb the new region. Investigators would begin to fear the worst, as next to no sign of the boy had been uncovered throughout the search, except for the lone hat. Investigators also believed that if Lawrence had still been alive, they most likely would have found him, as all the searchers were constantly calling out to Lawrence, saying his name, covering a large earshot distance that expanded over every square inch of the canyon and in the upper northern areas. Desperate for answers, It would be at around this time that local newspapers and several rumors spread throughout the local communities would make outlandish claims and theories on the cause of the 3-year-old boy's disappearance. A reporter would print an article claiming that investigators believed that it was possible that, given where the hat had been found almost a mile away from John's vehicle and above nearly impossible to traverse steep mountain passes, Lawrence had most likely been picked up by a passing eagle and flown out of the canyon. Despite the fact that even the largest eagle species in the world would have been unable to carry a small human child, the supporting evidence for this claim was that there appeared to have been no footprints or tracks leading to where the hat was found, though investigators did find footprints leading away from the hat that matched Lawrence's shoes. Although search and rescue teams would use a trained bloodhound to follow the footprints, it would appear as if the trail would suddenly stop as the dogs would lose the scent a few hundred feet away where the tracks would apparently disappear. After 2 days of being unable to find any sign of Lawrence, except for the recovered ball cap, the local county sheriff's department would reach out to a Native American tracker from a nearby reservation who was considered highly experienced in finding and recovering missing persons. Once the Native American tracker, a man by the name of Oscar Mike, arrived on site, he immediately would make the claim that he believed that a large animal had picked up Lawrence Sullivan a few hundred feet from where the ball cap had been recovered and carried him out of the canyon. Worried that the large animal could have been a mountain lion, Oscar Mike would tell family members to prepare for the worst. Following the trail from the footprints, Oscar Mike would tell investigators that it became apparent that the creature that had carried Lawrence was a highly experienced climber, as it appeared to have followed a path up the face of one of the encircling canyon walls, stretching at a near-perfect vertical slope for 500 feet. After equipping himself and a team of men with climbing rope, Oscar Mike would scale the towering wall while following evidence of the unknown creature's path until they reached a shelf only 3 feet wide. Once the team of men reached the shelf, the tracker would confirm to investigators that Lawrence had been placed on the ledge for an unknown period of time, as several indentations were believed to have been footprints that matched Lawrence's shoes. As the search and rescue teams continued through the area and ascended the mountain wall, it would be on the following day that the search for Lawrence Sullivan would come to an end. According to several published newspapers describing the last day of the search, a man by the name of Joe Clifford, following ahead of the trail of the Native American tracker, would reach an elevated shelf located several hundred yards from the main canyon where Lawrence Sullivan had last been seen, when he would come across a large fallen mahogany tree that appeared to have Lawrence pinned under a large main branch. After poking Lawrence several times, search and rescue volunteers would confirm that he was alive and well, despite almost 3 full days without food or water, and left stranded in simple clothes as temperatures in the canyon plummeted to freezing temperatures during the night. Oddly enough, Lawrence Sullivan was discovered in a strange position, supposedly stuck between one of the twisted branches of the fallen tree in such a way that volunteers claimed that even the slightest sudden movement of the tree could have snapped the boy's neck. At the time Lawrence was discovered, late in the evening of the 18th of October, at around 6:30 in the evening, he was completely unconscious, and after waking up, was unable to tell investigators what had happened to him during the several days he was missing. The local county sheriff's department would later tell reporters that Lawrence suffered only from a scraped knee, torn clothing and several scratches all over his body, but was otherwise completely healthy, and after spending several days in the hospital, would make a full recovery. An article published on the 18th of October in the Reno Evening Gazette voiced several puzzling facts about the mysterious disappearance and the bizarre recovery of Lawrence, believing that the events lacked sufficient explanations. The article would state that the most remarkable thing of the entire affair, according to Dr. McLeod, the hospital doctor overlooking Lawrence Sullivan's recovery, and others, is that Lawrence survived the bitter cold nights as the temperature dropped to nearly 0. At the point where Lawrence was found, the elevation is nearly 9,000 feet, according to estimates made by the United States Survey Office in Reno. The article would also go on to claim that not only was Lawrence Sullivan found at a location more than 7 miles from where he had last been seen by his uncle, but that the journey to where he had been found should have been impossible for him to have made on his own. Additionally, had Lawrence been carried to the location by a mountain lion or some large wild beast, it was even more peculiar that the boy was found alive with nothing but a few scrapes and scratches on his body. Despite Lawrence Sullivan making a full recovery, he would never provide a statement to investigators about what had happened during the 3 days that he had disappeared. To this day, the official explanation for Lawrence's disappearance and strange recovery was due to an eagle. Roger Shadinger. On the 27th of May, back in 1951, a 9-year-old by the name of Roger Shadinger would be reported missing sometime in the afternoon near the small town of Truckee, California. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance were considered so strange that investigators initially believed that Roger had been purposefully abandoned or something eerie was at play. When Roger would eventually be recovered, several strange statements made by Roger would raise even more questions when it came to his mysterious disappearance. Early morning, on May 27th, Mr. and Mrs. Harry Shadinger traveled to the small town of Truckee, California, from their home in San Diego and planned to spend the holiday fishing and enjoying the Sierras. It would be at around sometime in the afternoon that Harry would bring Roger with him to fish along the banks of a small waterway that was easily accessible from their vehicle, known as the Adler Creek, located on the northwestern edge of Truckee. Although easily accessible, the location of the bank of Adler Creek is considered one of the more isolated regions, resting at a height of about 6,600 feet in elevation, and rests right at the edge of the desolate, expansive wilderness of the Sierras to the northwest. While the two were fishing, Harry spent the majority of the time showing Roger how the equipment worked and trying to find an ideal spot where the fish were biting. Once in an ideal location, and with both of them standing a few feet away from each other, Harry and Roger talked about the trip and different plans they had for the holidays. However, after a few minutes, Harry suddenly noticed that Roger was quiet for a lot longer than normal, and so turned to where Roger had been standing but was unable to find him. Worried that he had wandered off on his own and gotten lost, Harry called out to Roger before leaving his spot and searching around the area for his 9-year-old son. After searching and calling his name for about 30 minutes, Harry started to realize that his son had completely disappeared, causing him to immediately get in contact with the local law enforcement agencies to ask for assistance in locating Roger. Shortly after being contacted, the Placer County Sheriff's Office and the Truckee City Police would join the family in searching for Roger that would include several hundred volunteers. Deputies, police officers, firefighter departments, community members, hikers, campers, and local residents would all join in the search for Roger before the end of the day and would cover a massive radius before nightfall. After the search teams covered the entire area surrounding where Harry and Roger had been fishing, as well as combing the river to make sure that Roger had not drowned, the teams were confident that Roger was nowhere in the area and decided to expand their search and begin to explore in less likely areas. Additionally, by this point in time, search and rescue volunteers had been using the father's strategy and were yelling Roger's name, hoping to get a response of any kind, but were unable to find or hear any sign of him. As nightfall came and temperatures began to plummet, investigators and volunteers began to worry that if Roger had fallen into water or gotten wet from any of the small lakes that littered the region, he could potentially suffer from hypothermia and be unable to find shelter. As their concerns continued to grow, the sheriff's department decided to try a bizarre strategy in order to locate the boy that defies common sense. At the time of the disappearance, rumors of the boy's strange vanishing began to circulate around the town, with many residents of Truckee believing that the cause of the boy's disappearance was far more supernatural in origin than a boy just getting lost in the wilderness. It would be due to these superstitious claims and desperation in finding the boy that the Placer County Sheriff would turn to a Native American shaman for advice. According to several news articles covering the incident, a special Native American tracker had been brought in by the sheriff, who was originally from the town of Stillwater, Nevada. The Native American tracker, a man by the name of Archie Hicks, had several years of experience and training in locating people, as well as claims that he had a special spiritual connection that could allow him to sense the location of people and find them. Oddly enough, 28 hours after Roger had disappeared, the Native American tracker would recover Roger more than 9 miles away from where he had last been seen, and more than 1,000 feet higher in elevation. According to the official search efforts, shortly after arriving in the area, Archie Hicks traveled to an area where search criteria claimed that it would be highly unlikely for Roger to be at. Despite these claims, Archie Hicks believed that Roger would be found at a much higher elevation and would tell others that he could sense that Roger was in the area more than 9 miles away from where he had last been seen. Travelling alone to the area, Archie Hicks's spiritual hunch would be proven correct, and he would find Roger in perfect condition asleep on the ridge of the closest mountain at an elevation of 7,600 feet. Despite having tracked and found Roger himself, Archie Hicks was also surprised to have him, and would later tell several news sources about a short conversation he had with Roger to better understand why he was in that location. It seemed to defy logic that Roger would travel through the roughest terrain in the area and travel uphill into a desolate area, and so when Archie Hicks would talk with Roger, he was desperate to get adequate answers about his strange decisions. Roger would tell Archie Hicks that he was on the ridge of the mountain because he was hiding from a group of individuals that he referred to as the People. Although Roger would never adequately describe who the People were, he would tell Archie Hicks that the reason that he was hiding from them was because he felt that they had bad intentions and meant to do him harm. Many of the news articles covering this story would assume that Roger meant that he had been hiding from the search and rescue teams, and that was why it was incredibly difficult for volunteers to locate him. However, the truth is that Roger claimed to have encountered the People in areas where search and rescue volunteers had not yet searched, and had first spotted the People while he was fishing with his father. Although Roger would never explain how he ended up in the area where he was found, he would imply that he had been taken to the area or woke up suddenly on the mountain. Roger also believed that his shoes were taken by the People, which he would tell Archie Hicks when Archie asked Roger why he was barefoot. Archie would later claim that he believed the People that Roger was hiding from referred to dark, malevolent spirits or forces that can take the form of human beings, but are in fact not human, and are often mentioned in Native American legends of skinwalkers, shapeshifters, and underground people. Even though Roger was barefoot, his feet did not appear to have been injured in any way, making it appear as if he had lost his shoes shortly before arriving to the area where he had been found. Even more peculiar, where Roger had been recovered was within a 9-mile radius of where 2 other individuals would eventually go missing. So, what do you make of these unsolved mysteries? Be sure to leave your questions and answers in the comment section below and help us to grow this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.